11 cars sit under the same floodlights, but they no longer look like they belong to the same sport. One machine has been raised onto its stand like a trophy already won. Another still wears fresh carbon fiber that hasn't finished proving itself. Somewhere in the garage, a gearbox that failed a driver in Hungary is being stripped down for the fourth time this season. While 200 meters away, a car nobody trusted in March is suddenly being timed like a threat. 11 cars arrived in the winter believing they'd built a championship contender. 11 races later, some have become exactly that, and others have become engineering disasters no one predicted. The gap between what a car was supposed to be and what it actually became is where this story lives. By the end of this breakdown, you'll understand why the constructor standings only tell half the story, and why some of these cars are far better and far worse than that table suggests. The truth doesn't hide anymore. Every car has now shown what it actually is, not what its factory promised in the winter. And it starts here. The halfway point of 2026 is a technical confession. After 11 races, every team has raced across a wide enough range of conditions that a car's real character can no longer be hidden by one lucky weekend or one bad Sunday. The constructors' standings tell you who is winning. They won't tell you why. The why is buried in balance, in tire degradation, in the trade-off between straight-line speed and cornering grip, and in driver complaints that rarely make headlines but decide races all the same. By the end of this breakdown, the order you think you know is going to look different. Start at the top. The Mercedes W7 has been the defining car of the season's first half, delivering 6 race wins and carrying Kimi Antonelli to the championship lead. It doesn't win on outright speed alone. It wins because it does almost everything well at once, a rare, complete package identity, with strong downforce and mechanical grip across a wide range of corner speeds, excellent traction out of slow corners, and standout straight-line performance. Rivals can usually point to one circuit type where their car comes alive. With the W7, there isn't an obvious weekend to circle on the calendar. It simply shows up competitive, regardless of what the track demands. What separates the W7 is efficiency. Class-leading energy deployment and tire management give it an edge precisely when it matters most, in the closing stages of a race, when everyone else is managing a fading car and Mercedes is still attacking. That efficiency isn't an accident. It's the product of a power unit that harvests and redeploys energy more effectively than anything else on the grid, which is why the W7 so often looks fastest not on a single qualifying lap, but on lap 50, when tires are gone and engines are straining, and the car that saved the most in reserve simply drives away from the field. But even the benchmark car isn't flawless. The W7 carries occasional power unit reliability issues that have cost it results it otherwise deserved, and under heavy braking and in low-speed corners, it holds a measurable disadvantage to Ferrari, a weakness that surfaces any time the calendar turns to a track built around traction zones and hairpins rather than sweeping high-speed corners. And even with the car performing at its best, George Russell has shown inconsistency on certain weekends, a reminder that the fastest machine on the grid still has to be extracted to its limit by a human being. The benchmark has cracks. The question is which team is built to exploit them. That team is Ferrari. The SF26 has been Mercedes' most credible challenger all season, anchored by wins from both Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc. Where the W7 wins through completeness, the SF26 wins through precision, superior mechanical grip and cornering performance in low-speed corners and heavy braking zones, widely regarded as the best on the grid in that specific discipline. That braking stability is the car's real signature. Drivers can attack the brake pedal later than anywhere else on the grid without the rear stepping out, which is exactly why the SF26 so often makes up time not through top speed, but through corner entry, shaving tenths in the one phase of a lap most cars are forced to be cautious in. Hamilton's resurgence this season is directly tied to how well this chassis suits the new regulations, a driver finding form again because the car finally rewards the precision he's always driven with. But the trade-off is costly. The SF26 carries a clear straight-line speed and energy deployment deficit versus the Mercedes, tied to a comparatively weaker internal combustion engine, and it's vulnerable to rear tire degradation in higher temperatures, a problem that has quietly cost Ferrari track position on hotter Sunday afternoons even after strong Saturdays. Call it the technical purist car, brilliant where precision matters, exposed where raw power decides. Then there's the team with flashes of brilliance, but not the consistency of the top two. McLaren, anchored by Lando Norris's victory in Hungary, has spent the season promising more than it's delivered. The strengths are real: aggressive floor and aerodynamic development that pays off specifically on high downforce circuits, and strong race execution when running in clean air. When the MCL40 gets exactly the conditions it wants, it can look like a genuine top-2 car for a single afternoon, which is precisely what makes its inconsistency so frustrating to watch play out week after week. The honesty of this car comes from its own driver. At Silverstone, Norris described the MCL40 as tricky and not a nice car to drive, a nervous balance that erodes driver confidence, especially in windy conditions. The deeper cause traces back to a draggy aerodynamic concept and a downforce deficit versus Mercedes and Ferrari, worsened by a development lag after the team overinvested in the previous season's car. The verdict is simple: dangerous on its day, but without the polish to be a consistent threat, a car defined by what it could be rather than what it consistently is. Nothing captures the season's biggest surprise quite like Red Bull. A former powerhouse sits with 0 wins at the halfway point, despite Max Verstappen's occasional podiums keeping the team from total irrelevance. The RB22 has one genuine strength: a potent Ford power unit giving strong straight-line speed, making the car hard to pass on power-heavy circuits, with mid-season upgrades narrowing the gap elsewhere. But that strength is being wasted, because the car's core problem runs deeper than horsepower. Poor overall balance and drivability define the RB22, especially through medium and low-speed corners. Verstappen gave the season its most damning quote from Hungary, describing an in-race degradation that makes the balance worsen lap after lap, meaning the car he starts a stint with is not the car he finishes it with, and no setup change has fully solved it. His teammate hasn't fared better. Isaac Hadjar bluntly described a gearbox downshift issue as a step back for the team, one that wrecked corner entry grip on top of an already unstable platform. And the demons don't stop there. Inconsistent clutch bite points and anti-stall software glitches have caused both drivers to bog down or lose positions at race starts, turning the first 3 seconds of a Grand Prix into a genuine gamble for a team that used to treat starts as a formality. The irony writes itself: raw power without control, a car that can go fast in a straight line but can't be trusted to turn. Just down the garage from that chaos sits the surprise stabilizer of the midfield. Racing Bulls and the Carb 03 have quietly built solid points hauls through Liam Lawson and Arvid Lindblad. They inherit the same efficient Red Bull Ford power unit that gives strong straight-line performance, but paired with a far more predictable chassis than the RB22, gentle tire wear, and a stable mechanical platform that rewards clean, mistake-free race stints over one-lap heroics. That stability comes at a cost in qualifying. Inherent understeer from the front-wing concept robs both drivers of the confidence to attack a single low-fuel lap, which is why the Carb 03 so often starts lower than its race pace deserves, only to climb back through the field once tire management becomes the deciding factor. It's proof that consistency, not outright pace, can be its own competitive weapon in the midfield battle. Alpine occupies similar territory, a dependable top-6 constructor built around Pierre Gasly's consistency and Franco Colapinto's occasional flashes of pace. The A526 strengths read like a checklist for a solid midfield car: reliability, a predictable handling balance, and decent straight-line speed on power circuits, aided by the customer Mercedes power unit. What holds it back is high-speed understeer, only partially addressed by a front-wing upgrade introduced in Austria. Set against Racing Bulls, it reinforces the season's running theme: 2 midfield teams, 2 different ceilings, decided by aerodynamic development aggression Alpine simply doesn't have. The gap between the two isn't measured in raw pace alone. It shows up most clearly in how each car behaves on lap 30 of a race, when one is still finding grip and the other is starting to fade. Further back, 2 teams tell a quieter, less dramatic story: reliable but invisible. Haas remains solid thanks to the Ferrari power unit, giving the VF26 reliability and straight-line performance around a simple, predictable chassis, but limited aerodynamic efficiency and tire degradation over race distance, worsened by limited development resources, keep it stuck behind the midfield. It is a car built to survive a weekend rather than win one. Audi, in its foundational season with the R26, tells a similar story from a different angle. A stable, confidence-building chassis and a promising new power unit give the manufacturer a platform to build from, but the car remains short on downforce and outright pace compared to established rivals. Points have still come, through Gabriel Bortolito and Nico Hülkenberg, proof that the platform, while unfinished, isn't broken. Together, Haas and Audi are two teams playing a longer game, banking experience rather than results. Then there's the season's most surprising underperformer given its equipment. Williams and the FW48 carry a Mercedes power unit, the same power unit driving the championship leader, and yet sit near the bottom of the standings. On paper, the strengths are obvious: strong straight-line speed, good energy deployment, and solid reliability that occasionally lets the team capitalize on race chaos. The real story is what's gone wrong underneath. The FW48 started the season significantly overweight, partially fixed by a Miami upgrade, only for the team to discover their simulation tools were overpromising real-world gains. It's a cautionary tale, proof that a great engine means nothing without the aerodynamic understanding to use it. A car can be quick on paper and still lose 2/10 a lap simply because the tools used to design it don't match the track it's raced on. Williams' hopes for the second half now rest entirely on a B-spec package debuting at Baku, and how the team reacts if that package underdelivers again may say more about its direction than the results ever will. If Williams represents a cautionary tale, Aston Martin represents the emotional turning point of this season. The worst car of 2026 was suddenly transformed by a radical B-spec upgrade at the Hungarian Grand Prix. A new chassis, nose, front wing, floor, diffuser, and bodywork arriving all at once. Even Fernando Alonso offered caution rather than celebration after that race, a sign the team itself doesn't yet fully understand its own overhauled car. One weakness remains clearly identified: a horsepower deficit from the Honda power unit, with a promised upgrade arriving at Zandvoort. What makes this section suspenseful is the scale of the jump, a car that went from worst to midfield competitive in a single weekend. The second half is the real test of whether that jump was real, or whether Hungary was one good weekend dressed up as a transformation, and whether a driver as experienced as Alonso can extract results from a car the team is still learning in real time. No team has absorbed more of a learning curve this season than Cadillac, in its debut year, built around veterans Valtteri Bottas and Sergio Perez. The strengths are straightforward: a solid Ferrari power unit, and a predictable chassis that lets both drivers extract consistent lap times. But the team's biggest threat hasn't been pace. It's been reliability, specifically brake failures, including a notable double brake failure in Austria that ended the weekend for both cars at once. That's the brutal learning curve of Formula One playing out in real time, growing pains that go beyond lap time and into simply finishing a race weekend intact. For a brand new operation, every unglamorous fix, a redesigned cooling duct, a revised brake bias map, matters just as much as any aerodynamic upgrade, because right now survival is the metric that counts. Which brings this story to its true cliffhanger. Every team on this grid has at least one more major upgrade package coming after the summer break. Everything laid out here is temporary. The pecking order isn't fixed, and some of these cars may change character entirely, not just improve incrementally, the way Aston Martin already has once this season. The second half carries specific, unresolved stakes. Can Ferrari close the straight-line gap that's cost the SF26 results it otherwise deserved? Can Red Bull fix the cornering instability that's turned a championship-winning operation into a team with 0 wins at the midpoint? Can Aston Martin's Hungary jump prove real once the rest of the grid has had time to respond? Can Williams' Baku package finally match the simulation numbers that let the team down all spring? And can Mercedes hold its efficiency advantage once every rival arrives with a fresh power unit specification designed specifically to close that gap? A Formula One car's championship position is only half the story. The real drama lives in the invisible trade-offs, in the driver radio messages nobody was meant to hear, and in the upgrades still sitting on a factory bench somewhere, waiting for their moment. 11 races have written the first half of this story. The second half is where every verdict laid out here gets tested for real, and if you want to be there when those verdicts land, this is the story to follow it with.